I still remember the sound of their laughter, the way it echoed through the halls of my school like a cruel melody. It was a sound that seemed to follow me everywhere, a constant reminder that I was the target of their jokes. I was the kid with the worn-out shoes, the hand-me-down clothes, and the haircut that my mom gave me at home. I was the kid who didn't fit in, who didn't have the right toys or the right friends. Growing up, I was always a bit of an outsider. I didn't have the same interests as the other kids, and I didn't have the same kind of family. My parents worked hard to make ends meet, but we struggled to get by. I remember feeling like I was always on the outside looking in, watching as the other kids played together, went on vacation together, and explored the world together. But it wasn't just the feeling of being left out that hurt. It was the way they would mock me, tease me, and belittle me. They would make fun of my clothes, my hair, and my accent. They would call me names, push me around, and exclude me from their games. I remember feeling like I was all alone, like I was the only one who was going through this. The pain of being bullied was like a weight that I carried with me every day. It was a constant ache that I couldn't shake, a feeling of sadness and isolation that seemed to follow me everywhere. I would try to ignore it, to pretend like it didn't hurt, but it was hard. It was hard to walk through the halls of my school, to sit in class, and to look at the faces of the kids who had hurt me so much. I was angry, too. I was angry at the kids who had bullied me, angry at the teachers who didn't do anything to stop it, and angry at myself for not being able to fight back. I felt like I was trapped, like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of pain and humiliation. But little did they know, this anger would soon fuel my journey to success. I still remember the countless nights I spent crying myself to sleep, the echoes of my classmates' laughter and cruel words lingering in my mind. But as I entered my teenage years, something inside of me began to shift. I realized that I couldn't change the way others treated me, but I could change the way I reacted to it. I started to channel my anger and frustration into something more productive business. My first venture was a small lemonade stand I set up in front of my house. I was only 12 years old, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I was determined to make it work. I spent hours researching recipes, making posters, and perfecting my sales pitch. But despite my best efforts, the stand was a flop. I sold only a handful of cups, and I ended up losing money. But I didn't let that discourage me. I used the experience as an opportunity to learn and improve. I asked myself what went wrong and what I could do differently next time, and then I tried again, and again, and again. As I entered high school, my entrepreneurial spirit only grew stronger. I started selling candies and snacks to my classmates, and I even attempted to launch a small tutoring business. Not all of my ventures were successful, but I learned something valuable from each one. It wasn't until I was 16 years old that I realized my true passion was in entrepreneurship. I was attending a business summer camp, and one of the guest speakers was a young entrepreneur who had built a successful company from scratch. Listening to her story, I felt a spark ignite within me. I knew that I wanted to be just like her, to build a business that would make a real difference in people's lives. From that moment on, I dedicated myself to learning everything I could about business. I read books, attended seminars, and even landed an internship at a startup. And as I delved deeper into the world of entrepreneurship, I began to find solace in it. The anger and frustration that had once consumed me began to fade away, replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. I was building something that was mine, something that would allow me to prove to myself and others that I was capable of greatness. And as I looked to the future, I knew that nothing could stop me. I was ready to take on the world, one business venture at a time. But little did I know, my biggest challenge was just around the corner, waiting to test my resolve and push me to my limits. I still remember that feeling of desperation that crept in when I lost a significant amount of money. All the sacrifices, all the late nights, and all the hard work seemed to have been for nothing. I felt like I was back at square one, and the weight of my failures was crushing me. It was a chilly winter evening when I realized I had hit rock bottom. The rain poured outside, mirroring my mood, and the dim light of my small apartment seemed to mock me. I slumped on my couch, staring blankly at the wall, wondering how I had let this happen. The doubts and negative voices that I had tried to silence for so long finally caught up with me. I thought about all the people who had laughed at me, all the ones who had doubted me. I remembered the painful memories of being a target of jokes, of being belittled and ridiculed. The anger and frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. I knew I had two choices: I could let this setback define me, or I could use it as fuel to propel me forward. Something inside me clicked that night. The anger, the frustration, and the pain merged into a fierce determination. I knew I had to prove to myself and to everyone else that I was not a failure. I picked myself up, and with a newfound sense of purpose, I began to rebuild. The days that followed were not easy. I poured my heart and soul into my work, often going without sleep and sacrificing every ounce of comfort. But I was driven by a newfound sense of anger and determination. I was no longer just trying to succeed, I was fighting to prove a point. And slowly, things began to fall into place. The hard work, the late nights, and the sacrifices started to pay off. I began to see a glimmer of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel. And I knew, no matter what came next, I was ready to face it head-on. The fire that had been ignited within me was unstoppable, and I knew that nothing could ever extinguish it. I was on a mission to prove to the world that I was not a joke, and that I was worthy of success. The setback that had almost broken me had, in fact, become the turning point of my life. I still remember the days when everyone thought I was a joke, when every door I tried to open would slam shut in my face. But all of that changed when I hit rock bottom. Something inside of me clicked, and I realized that I had two choices: to let the opinions of others define me or to use my anger to fuel my determination. I chose the latter. I spent every waking moment thinking about my business, trying to come up with a strategy that would turn things around. I spent countless hours researching, networking, and experimenting. I poured my heart and soul into every aspect of my company, from the products to the marketing to the customer service. And slowly but surely, things started to pay off. I began to see growth, small at first, but it was there. I remember the first time I saw a significant spike in sales. I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, and I felt a rush of excitement. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But I knew I couldn't stop there. I had to keep pushing, keep striving for more. I used my anger and determination to drive me forward. I started to take risks, to try new things, to experiment with new ideas. And it paid off. My business started to take off, and I found myself struggling to keep up with the demand. I remember the first time I had to hire employees. It was a surreal moment for me. I had always been the one struggling to make ends meet, and now I was in a position to create jobs for others. It was a feeling of pride and accomplishment that I had never felt before. As my business continued to grow, I began to realize the importance of adaptability. I had to be willing to pivot and adjust my strategy as needed. I had to be willing to learn from my mistakes and to take constructive criticism from others. It wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. And then something amazing happened. My business reached a milestone that I never thought possible. We hit $1 million in revenue, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. I had done it. I had proven to myself and to everyone else that I was capable of achieving greatness. But little did I know, this was just the beginning. My business would continue to grow and flourish, and I would face new challenges and opportunities that would test my skills and resolve. I was about to embark on a journey that would take me to heights I never thought possible. I'll never forget the day my business finally started to take off. It was like a dream come true, but little did I know that with success comes a whole new set of challenges. As I sat in my small office, staring at the financial reports and seeing the numbers skyrocket, I couldn't shake off the feeling of self-doubt that had been lingering in the back of my mind for weeks. It started with small things, like second-guessing my decisions and questioning my abilities. I would find myself lying awake at night, thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how I wasn't good enough to handle them. The voice of doubt in my head was like a constant whisper, eroding my confidence and making me feel like an imposter. I tried to push through, to focus on the progress I had made and the success I had achieved, but it was no use. The doubts had taken hold, and I couldn't shake them off. I started to wonder if I was truly cut out for this, if I had just been lucky so far, and if it was all going to come crashing down around me. It was a dark time, and I felt like I was losing myself in the process. But then something changed. I realized that I wasn't alone in feeling this way. I started talking to other entrepreneurs, people who had been in my shoes and had come out the other side. They shared their own struggles with self-doubt and how they had overcome them. One of them told me something that stuck with me. You can't let your doubts define you. You have to face them head-on and remind yourself of why you started in the first place. It was simple, yet profound. I realized that I had been so focused on the doubts that I had forgotten why I started my business in the first place. I took a step back and I looked at my business with fresh eyes. I remembered the passion and excitement that had driven me to start it, and I let that fuel my determination to push forward. I started to focus on my strengths rather than my weaknesses, and I reminded myself of all the things I had accomplished so far. Slowly but surely, the doubts began to fade away. I regained my confidence, and I started to see my business in a new light. I realized that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to take the leap and see where it takes you. With renewed confidence, I set my sights on even bigger goals and aspirations. I was no longer held back by my doubts, and I was ready to take on the world. The fire that had driven me to start my business in the first place was back, and it was burning brighter than ever. I was ready for whatever came next, and I knew that nothing could stop me now. I still remember the day I realized I couldn't do it all by myself. My business was growing at an incredible rate, and I was drowning in a sea of tasks and responsibilities. I knew I needed help, but I was hesitant to let go of control. After all, this was my baby, and I had poured my heart and soul into it. But I knew I had to take the leap. I started by hiring a few part-time employees to help me with the workload. It was a daunting task, as I had never been in a position of authority before. I was used to being the one taking orders, not giving them. But I was determined to make it work. I remember the first interview I conducted like it was yesterday. I was nervous and fumbling, but the candidate was kind and understanding. She was a recent graduate, eager to learn and grow with the company. I hired her on the spot, and she became my first official employee. As the team grew, I realized the importance of developing a company culture. I wanted my employees to feel valued and respected, to know that they were an integral part of the business. I started by implementing regular team-building activities, from casual lunches to volunteer days. It was amazing to see how quickly everyone bonded, how they became a family. But the biggest challenge for me was learning to delegate tasks. I was used to doing everything myself, and it was hard to let go of that control. I would find myself micromanaging, questioning every decision my employees made. It was exhausting, and I knew I had to stop. One day, I had a conversation with my first employee, the one I had hired on the spot. She came to me with a problem, and I found myself trying to solve it for her. But she gently pushed back, telling me that she had it under control. She just needed my trust. It was a wake-up call for me. I realized that I had hired these incredible people for a reason. They were talented, capable, and passionate. I needed to trust them, to give them the autonomy to make decisions and take ownership of their work. It wasn't easy, but I slowly started to let go. I delegated tasks, gave my employees more responsibility, and watched as they flourished. The company started to run more smoothly, and I was able to focus on the big picture. I was proud of what we had built, of the team that had become my family. We were a well-oiled machine working together towards a common goal, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a team. But just as things were starting to fall into place, I faced a new challenge: managing a team. It was one thing to hire employees, but it was another thing entirely to lead them. I was about to learn that being a boss wasn't just about giving orders, but about inspiring and motivating others to reach their full potential. I still remember the day I realized that building a team was just the beginning of a new set of challenges. As the owner of a rapidly growing company, I had to learn how to manage my team effectively if I wanted to succeed. At first, I struggled to communicate with my team. I was so used to doing everything on my own that I didn't know how to delegate tasks or provide clear instructions. I would often find myself getting frustrated with my employees, feeling like they weren't working hard enough or understanding what I wanted. But as I reflected on my own experiences as an employee, I realized that I had been just as clueless as they were. I had been so focused on my own anger and frustration that I hadn't taken the time to learn how to work with others. And now, as a leader, I was paying the price. I knew I had to make a change, so I started reading books and attending seminars on leadership and communication. I learned about the importance of active listening, clear messaging, and emotional intelligence. I practiced using I statements instead of you statements, and I made an effort to ask for feedback from my team. It wasn't easy, but slowly I started to see improvements. My team began to trust me more, and they started to take ownership of their work. I was able to delegate tasks more effectively, and I found that I had more time to focus on the big picture. But with growth comes new challenges, and I soon found myself facing tough decisions as a leader. I had to decide who to promote, who to fire, and how to allocate resources. I had to navigate conflicts between team members and make difficult choices that didn't always make everyone happy. It was a steep learning curve, but I was determined to succeed. I sought out mentors and advisors who could offer guidance and support. I learned to trust my instincts and make decisions with confidence. And as I looked around at my team, I saw people who were passionate, dedicated, and talented. I saw people who were willing to follow me on this wild journey and who were just as committed to our mission as I was. I realized that being a leader wasn't just about giving orders and making decisions. It was about creating an environment where people could thrive, grow, and succeed. It was about empowering others to take ownership and make a difference. And as I looked to the future, I knew that our company was poised for even greater success. I knew that we would face new challenges and opportunities, but I was confident that we were ready to take them on. I still remember the countless nights I spent staring at our company's financial reports, trying to make sense of the numbers and figuring out how to take our business to the next level. After building a successful team, I knew it was time to focus on scaling our operations. I was determined to make our company a household name, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. I started by gathering my team around me and explaining my vision for the future. I wanted to expand our product line, increase our marketing efforts, and break into new markets. I could see the skepticism in their eyes, but I knew that with the right strategy, we could make it work. We spent the next few weeks developing a comprehensive plan for growth and expansion. We analyzed our competition, identified areas of opportunity, and created a roadmap for success. It wasn't easy, but I was driven by a fierce determination to prove myself, to prove that I was more than just a joke. As we began to implement our plan, we faced numerous challenges. We encountered logistical nightmares, supplier issues, and even conflicts within the team. But I refused to give up. I poured all my energy into finding solutions, into motivating my team and pushing us forward. And slowly but surely, our hard work began to pay off. Our sales numbers started to climb, our brand recognition increased, and we began to attract attention from investors. It was a surreal experience, going from being the target of jokes to being the owner of a successful business. But I knew that I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. I had to stay focused, keep pushing forward. As our business continued to grow, I found myself facing new challenges and opportunities. I was constantly being tested, constantly being forced to adapt and innovate. But I was ready. I had come too far to let anything stand in my way. And so, I steeled myself for the next chapter in our journey, ready to face whatever came next with courage, determination, and a relentless drive to succeed. I still remember the day we hit the $10 million milestone like it was yesterday. It was a surreal moment, a mix of emotions, happiness, relief, and a sense of vindication. All the late nights, early mornings, and endless cups of coffee had finally paid off. I decided to celebrate this achievement with my team, the people who had been with me through thick and thin. We rented a beautiful private room at a trendy restaurant in the city with a stunning view of the skyline. The atmosphere was electric, with everyone beaming with pride and excitement. We shared stories, laughed, and even cried a little, reminiscing about the journey that had brought us to this point. As I looked around the room, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. From being the target of jokes and ridicule to building a $10 million company. It was a journey that had tested my limits, pushed me to the edge, and forced me to grow as a person. I thought about all the times I'd been doubted, belittled, and underestimated, and how those experiences had fueled my determination to succeed. But as I gazed out at the sea of smiling faces, I knew that this milestone wasn't just about me. It was about the collective effort, the blood, sweat, and tears that every single person in that room had put in. It was about the late nights, the early mornings, and the endless cups of coffee that had fueled our journey. As we celebrated, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude and humility. I knew that this milestone was just a stepping stone, a launchpad for even greater success. I had bigger plans, bolder aspirations, and a burning desire to take our company to new heights. As the night wore on, and the champagne flowed, I took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought us to this point. I thought about the struggles, the setbacks, and the lessons learned. And I knew that this milestone was just the beginning, a testament to what we could achieve when we worked together, supported each other, and dared to dream big. But little did I know, this milestone was just the tip of the iceberg. We had bigger challenges to overcome, greater obstacles to conquer, and even more audacious goals to achieve. The journey ahead would be just as treacherous, just as unpredictable, and just as thrilling. But I was ready, my team was ready, and together we were unstoppable. As I sat in my office, surrounded by the hum of activity and the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. We had done it, we had reached the $10 million milestone, and it felt amazing. But as I gazed out the window, watching the sun set over the city, I knew that this was just the beginning. I thought back to the early days, when I was the target of jokes and ridicule. I thought about the anger and frustration that had fueled my determination to succeed. And I realized that those emotions had been the catalyst for something incredible. As I looked to the future, I knew that I had even bigger goals and aspirations. I wanted to continue growing and expanding my business, to push the boundaries of what was possible, and to see just how far we could go. I spent hours poring over business books and articles, attending seminars and networking events, always on the lookout for new ideas and strategies to implement. But it wasn't just about the business, it was about the people too. I wanted to inspire others with my story, to show them that no matter where they came from or what they had been through, they too could achieve success. I started speaking at events and conferences, sharing my journey and offering guidance and advice to those who were just starting out. It was an incredible feeling, knowing that I had the power to make a difference in someone's life. And as I stood on stage, microphone in hand, I could see the spark of determination in the eyes of my audience. I knew that I was helping to ignite a fire within them, a fire that would drive them to work harder, to push themselves further, and to never give up on their dreams. As the applause faded and the audience began to disperse, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This was what it was all about, not just building a business, but building a community, a family of like-minded individuals who were all working together towards a common goal. And as I walked off stage, I knew that this was just the beginning. The future was bright, and I was excited to see what lay ahead. I was ready for the next challenge, the next obstacle, the next opportunity to grow and learn and succeed. Bring it on, I thought, with a smile spreading across my face. I'm ready for whatever comes next.